world is changing fast. New technologies are impacting how we think about products, services, and the way we live our lives. Nowhere is this trend more present than in financial services, where new business models and customer expectations are changing our conceptions about banking, finance, and the very nature of money. Welcome to Rebank, a visionary podcast about banking, fintech, and the future. The future of banking is here. Hello and welcome to Rebank. I'm your host, Will Beeson. Consumer behavior in China has captivated the West for years, and behavior around fintech and payments is no different. Ant Group's planned $200 billion upcoming IPO raises more questions than it answers in the minds of many in the West, who, like me, don't have direct experience with super apps and ubiquitous QR code-based payments. Last week, we recorded a breakdown of Ant Group's upcoming IPO with fintech analysts Max Friedrich and Lex Sokolin, which is under compliance review and will be released soon. Today's conversation, by contrast, explores Chinese consumer fintech behavior through the eyes of the users, specifically two Chinese tech entrepreneurs who have also spent significant time in London and can compare and contrast the environments in the two countries. Linda Jiang is a deep tech founder and serial entrepreneur. In 2010, she co-founded Umeng, a mobile analytics and developer platform that grew to support 180,000 apps and become the largest platform of its kind in China before selling to Alibaba in 2015. Linda is now co-founder of Nodes and Links, a UK-based construction AI startup, and an advisor to Baidu Ventures, an early-stage deep tech-focused fund backed by Baidu, one of China's tech giants. Yi Luo is the co-founder of FreeUp, a company unlocking daily salary payment for workers. In 2019, FreeUp was acquired by Greensill, where Yi now leads strategy. This conversation was recorded in February of 2020, pre-COVID, and before I relocated to New York, which may explain some of the references. To subscribe to the Rebank newsletter, including insights, essays, and written transcripts of all new episodes, please visit bankingthefuture.com. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please welcome Linda Jiang and Yi Luo. Yi and Linda, welcome to Rebank.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
This is very exciting. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. We've talked a lot about fintech and tech generally all over the world. US, UK, Europe, Australia, South America. We haven't really gone deep in China at any point. And what better opportunity than this one to do that? So you guys have fascinating backstories and bring amazing perspective on how innovation in technology and fintech works in the UK and also in China, where you're both from. So maybe we could start with quick introductions. Yi,
Sure.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Hi, I'm Yi. I'm the head of strategy in Greensill. Previously, I used to be a founding member and chief strategy officer of a startup called FreeUp. We change how people get paid. We let people to have access to their salary as soon as they earned. Last year in October, we were acquired by Greensill. I'm not going to talk on Greensill because I know there was a previous episode that you have done with Sean Anderson, our chairman.
I highly recommend everyone.
Yeah, so for anyone interested, please check that out. And I was born in China. I was born in Beijing. I grew up in Beijing, and heart and soul, I'm a Chinese. But I've spent the past 12 years in UK, even though I've been, back and forth a lot. So I think I always look at things sometimes in a Western lens, in a way that every time I go back to China, especially for work reasons, that in the startup world, sometimes I just have a lot of cultural shock, reverse cultural shock.
Well, I look forward to exploring that. I think that'll be a fun topic to pick up. Linda?
Hi, I'm Linda. I started my career, I think, from the mobile industry. So I used to do a lot of consultancy work for all the telco operators in the UK. And just after iPhone came up, and I joined the Samsung to actually work on the Samsung apps and services. It's kind of very early stage to bring traditional internet services and put on the mobile. And then so I decided to move back to China. I'm originally from China. And then I kind of did a mobile big data company, Umeng, and we basically provide like mobile analytics and advertising solutions for the mobile ecosystem. At the end, we sold the company to Alibaba. So my background was in the data and AI, all this kind of space. And I think Fintech is actually a one area actually heavily leveraged the power of data and really use data to create very exciting services from consumer side or the back end, like a B2B kind of stuff. Right now I'm starting a new kind of entrepreneur journey. I'm a co-founder and chief product officer of Notes and Links. So it's an AI startup for the construction industry.
All right. So maybe the first question to kind of get us into this is for you, Linda. And I genuinely have no idea how you're likely to answer this, but you started one company in China and you were doing mobile data and advertising, it sounds like. And then you very recently started another company here in the UK doing robotic decision-making in construction. Could you have started the mobile data and advertising company in the UK? Or is there anything specific about one ecosystem or the other?
I think it's about timing. And the time, for the Umeng, which the big data analytics company that started, that was 2010. At that time, China just starting this like a smartphone evolution. So we were kind of really, really, really early startups working on mobile platform and then provided, tool set for the ecosystem. I think it's the timing. At that time, China's really just starting. Even at that time in 2010, back to the UK, lots of people already have an iPhone and Android, right? But in China, I was just mobile internet, I think, the beginning of the time. I think the timing is really important. So we were really lucky. In China, lots of startups actually mostly work on B2C because it's easier. It's less constrained. They can move really fast.
Interesting. What do you guys think it is about China that makes the B2C business model easier or preferable to B2B?
I think not really easy. It's hard. It's very, very hard. B2C is really, really hard. But I think the market size is there. So because the market size is there, so it's very easy to test something. I actually talked to a lot of B2C, particularly fintech startup in the UK. The customer base is very small. So you're probably targeting like 20,000 customers for your beta test. But in China, that's probably just a day or target.
Yeah.
So you can really, really move in the iteration really fast if you doing the right way. So I think that, and also I think it's huge population, but everyone just speak one language, kind of one culture. So if your product are right in Beijing, Shanghai, it's easily to get successful in other territories as well. But like in UK, naturally I want to go to Europe, but different language, different culture. Even in the US, actually a little bit different culture as well. So I think to grow your customer base, I think it's a little bit harder for that.
We were talking, before we started recording, about early stage B2C businesses and the flexibility that they often have. Do you want to pick up on that point at all?
Yes, I think there is a misconception that always Chinese government is in control of the data and there's a lot of regulation consideration. Yes, there are. If you are a bank, if you are becoming a challenger bank yourself, there's just tons of consideration there. But to be honest, in the early stage of any kind of startup, I see a lot of freedom, to be honest, that in that region, for you to make an experiment, for you to try error, and until you get something terribly wrong, or until you becoming the Alibaba or which has too big to fail, then you started to get the regulation that look at you seriously. But before that, I don't know if it's a pros and cons. P2B business in China is just completely killed overnight because regulation suddenly realized there's a problem. But if there have been a sandbox scheme, if that's being monitored in the beginning, probably the industry won't vanish overnight. So yeah, that's my view.
You mentioned as we kind of started that you get culture shock sometimes when you go back to China from the UK. What drives that culture shock, specifically in the kind of like tech, fintech context? Oh,
I mean, I think, just as a human being, I have culture shock all the time. I just give you an example of an anecdote. I went back to Beijing last year to see the family. And when I get out of the taxi, because I haven't switched my SIM card yet, and I don't want to connect the internet with the expenses my, provider free. So I have some Chinese cash with me. And when I get into the taxi, you see Linda start to laugh. When I got on a taxi, I was like, I arrived, it's 150. I was trying to give this guy 200 cash. And he was like, oh, like, come on, like, I haven't seen a cash, like, probably for a whole month. Like, I don't want cash. Can you pay by, WeChat Pay or Alipay or whatever? And I was like, I'm sorry that, but he said, I have no change. So I end up giving him the 50 Chinese currency as tip. And it's so interesting. On my way come back in Paddington, I pick up the taxi. I remember very clearly on that, the glass panel between me and driver, there's a sticker saying, even though this taxi accepts credit card, I prefer cash in a black cap.
Right, when you got back to the UK.
Yeah, when I got back to the UK. And that really begged a question for me. I was like, why? So I started to Google and search the cost involved in this transaction. And I realized that in UK, there are different options of terminal you can set up, but the cost is from 3% to 6% you need to pay as a taxi driver. Well, in China, that is 10 basis points that you pay.
Through WeChat or Alipay.
Through WeChat, yeah, through Alipay. So you see the difference of this is almost like a cashless society. It's quite real in China that in the 7-Eleven, just very close to my home, you can use a facial recognition to pay. You don't even need to bring your mobile phone. You just go there, scan your face, and type in your Ali account. And once it's matched, you just pay it. So, in that circumstances, you can literally go out with your towel around your waist and to get yourself a drink.
Wow.
So, but I look at it through quite a Western lens. And when I taught that to my Chinese friends, they were like, oh my God, like, it feels like I'm from a rural area. But when I talk to my British friends, they were like, oh my God, that sounds so cool, interesting.
One of the explanations that you hear for the reason that, this like big shift kind of toward mobile payments specifically happens so quickly in China, whereas here, I think New York even recently like passed a law saying all business establishments had to accept cash. So like put an end to the cashless restaurants. I think the concern was about excluding certain demographics from, the economy. The explanation here is this concept of like a leap from a complete lack of infrastructure, like electronic payments infrastructure, suddenly like to the mobile world where mobile payments can happen. Is that true in your experience?
I think it is. I think this is like, that's something we've been discussing all the time. Like, I think we can think about two ways I think about this kind of thing. In China, surely nobody uses cash anymore. And, a friend of mine living in the US and he came back to China in the shop and, in the counter, people, ask her, how does she like to pay? And she said, I pay credit card, and nobody know how to use credit card machine, basically. And it was like shock. Say, why do you want to use credit card? Can I just get WeChat? But even just no cash, even credit card, people don't use anymore. Nobody use that anymore in the regular basis. So I think there's two directions going. One is really because the payment provider really pushed that, like Alipay and WeChat Pay. They spend lots money and effort to make the payment as easy as for consumer. They also make the merchandiser. Basically, it's a very low fee for the merchandiser. Also, it's very fast payment back, the cash back to the merchandiser. Credit card, you're probably taking 30 days to get your money. Some provider will probably get 7 days, but for Alipay and WeChat Pay, it's N+1. So basically, the things I sell today, next day the cash go back to my merchant's bank account. So it's like they really lower the barrier for merchant to take that. For consumer side, they did like a massive campaign initially, and they're not really looking for. Traditional people thinking this kind of new technology, only younger generation will take it, right? That's everything in here. We only target the millennial, but WeChat, Alipay, they not limited their customer to younger generation. They target the whole population. Some campaign they run just encourage old people to use their mobile pay to do that. Also, they really try to divert people to use mobile pay, even they purchase like online. Like Alipay basically initially did that, like you buy on Taobao, which is like Amazon, very like Amazon or PayPal kind of thing. You can still order on the website, but go to the payment page, they will say, use your Alipay, use your, Taobao app to make a payment, you get a 10% discount. Something like that. So they really kind of transfer their customer to use the mobile payment as a way, part of their day-to-day life kind of thing. So I think they really shift that concept. Like even like also this social norm, I think is also very interesting. In here, I think people still feel a little bit worried about something. Is this too new, But in China, it's really the social norm is more like if everybody use it, I would like to use that. So it's very interesting. Like I even, told my parents to say, try this, they never do it. And one day my dad basically come back and say, okay, you set up this to me. Just because in the supermarket, everybody look at him like, oh, you don't have a WeChat. I feel very kind of out. So I think that's also create different society, different kind of thing.
I think from my perspective, fundamentally, there's a stage of development, isn't it? So 10 years ago, because Chinese banks, the level of development is so bad. It's not like in UK, in US, you have a relatively mature banking infrastructure. Like even though people nowadays, not necessarily like incumbent banks, but look at the 10, 20 years ago, they were pretty good in terms of like, if you look in the whole world. But because of China's so lack of a good payment way, that you don't have good credit cards, the credit card adoption is incredibly small in China. And so once a technology company get in, they really got a chance to leapfrog on the mobile payment. And I think another interesting thing, you talk about financial inclusion, when they say like, well, this have to include cash. I think in China, you see the opposite, that why there are 1 billion WeChat Pay users is because a lot of people, they don't have a bank account, but they use this as a wallet. So it serves perfectly as their bank account. They can get their friends who has a bank account to transfer money in their wallet, and they just use it as a, bank account. They don't really care, like if they have it in the future or not. So I see that Amazon has started some initiative in America who enable a wallet that serves underbanked people. And I think that's great. And I see there's more challenger bank initiative in UK to particularly serve people who doesn't have a bank account. But I think in China, that position was quite unique. And you could only happen in that kind of like macro environment, in that stage, and it's basically a timing, and also if that's ready for the market. Yeah.
Do you have any sense of what government or monetary policy decision makers make of a world in which transactions happen outside of banks, and you get your friend to withdraw some money and then transfer it into your account, and it doesn't really kind of come back into what at least in the UK or the US would be like the system that's regulated by the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve?
I think there's some regulation even for the Alipay, WeChat Pay, this kind of thing, because everything's still logged, right? It's not like a blockchain payment, actually anonymized. So even on WeChat, we pay each other, that's still logged. And that's all we verified. ID has been verified to enable that kind of transaction. So they still have a record. And also from a regulation perspective, I think for the mobile payment company, government has a license. So only a number of company could offer that mobile payment services. Yeah. It's quite strict license.
Yeah. And I was got to ask a very interesting question the other day by my colleague saying that, how do you do KYC in China? If the experience sounds so similar, it's like, how do you get the KYC down? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I was heard that it was because all the Chinese mobile phone are registered under a real name, under your ID. So once you put your mobile phone in it, that was part of the KYC have already been done because it's all based on the real name and the real person. And also, like Linda said, there's a regulation part that goes into mobile payment. And I also think this is a interlocking system. Like Alipay is a big interlocking system, and WeChat Pay is another. From a regulatory perspective, if those two they are compliant, to be honest, the complexity of managing data or the money flow is relatively easy. And it's always capped as well. It's a lot of them are for the farmers, for the construction workers. They send small amount on a daily basis without a bank. It's difficult. But nowadays they can do it through mobile payment.
Just on top of that KYC thing, because actually it's like very strict KYC. So because everyone has to put their ID number whenever they open a bank, whatever, even just a normal bank or online banking or, online payment service or online, any investment product if you want to buy, then have to go through this. You have to have your basic ID cards, the photocopy. It's very similar to here. And most often like Alipay, they will ask you officials, basically open your phone and have look at your face, and then they make sure that's not the picture. They want you to actually move your eye a little bit and then that kind of stuff to make sure they got to capture your facial information. Yeah.
So if something goes wrong, that I can assure you that, in China, things can be catch pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe that's slightly related to the to question that popped in my mind before. So you were talking about paying at 7-Eleven through a facial scan.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? Like, is it just totally normal and it's all good?
It's not.
Or?
I've been here too long. It's kind of a little bit scary for me in a way. I'm in this love and hate relationship. When I was using it, I was like, oh, it's so easy. It's so quick. Oh my God, I don't need to get my wallet, get my mobile phone out. But when I get back and think about it, I got a little bit scary because I also think that is my job in this country that I'm working with a fintech. We have very high standard of the GDPR, data protection, and you consistently think about that. And when you put yourself on that fit, you feel like, oh my God, like how much data I'm giving to those providers to be able to use the services is quite scary. Like in the morning, what you buy, you go to see a cinema and you buy a bottle of water in which location. And if they connect all the dots, they probably know better than your husband on where you have been to and who have you seen and all this kind of information. So it's very scary. But I guess it's always a balance between efficiency and data protection.
Do you have thoughts on that, Linda?
Yeah, I think in a border context, we all worry about our data security, right? Data privacy. Even without official ID, we've been tracked, even in London, we'll be tracked so many times. And our phone, sometimes I saw the ads Google pushed to me. It just really relate to something I actually bought in a corner shop in the lunchtime. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how the data algorithm work, or it's just coincidence. I don't know, but I think it's something I think really, I think China is building the data privacy law and they really crack down a lot of things. Like lots of company used to be like alternative data company, and then now all kind of have to be regulated. So I think every country start to doing something. And I think I really agree with what Yi said. At the end, it's like, the balance about efficiency and the protection, right? The trust. Like I use iPhone, I always actually give iPhone my Face ID when I pay on my phone. In some way, Apple know everything about me, right? But then that's kind of some way I kind of trust Apple, which I use the services. But I guess it all depends on the provider. We'll be able to build that trust, also be actually being regulated properly, and then to really provide a good service at the same time to can protect our privacy. Yeah.
switching gears a little bit, and I appreciate I'm about to ask a kind of a big question, but so we've all spent time in the UK, spent years in the UK, and we have a sense of the relationship and the roles between government, maybe universities, and businesses, i.e. private sector, in innovation, designing the future, building, developing, and deploying new things. And I think, most people maybe in the UK and US would kind of think of like the private sector pretty much driving all that, and the government at the very best, kind of providing some regulation a little bit later to make sure that things work the way they're supposed to. And perhaps, designing the right systems so that the economies can work the way they're supposed to, and effectively the private sector can be effective. And I think universities contribute largely as more or less autonomous organizations who often kind of internally focused, but nonetheless training very qualified workers to then participate in private sector, generally private sector later on. In your experience, would you describe the relationship between those three actors in China as being the same, similar, or different in any meaningful ways when it comes specifically to innovation and driving technological change?
I think technology, I agree with you. I think most actually private sector drive, particularly in China, actually, Baidu, Ali, Tencent, they are the leading giant company. And then as also a lot like tech company, they really drive the innovation. But I think, the university play a very important role as well. The talent, right? The great people, great students graduate. Also the research have been done. But I think, if we compare to here, I think the university in here, they're doing much better in terms of the commercialization, the research in the UK. I think, every university have that kind of unit try to commercialize the research. In China, I think a lot of universities just start working on that direction. So there's still successful cases, but I think there should be more researches could be potential use in the private sector. But I think right now the university really provide really, really great people, particularly in the technology sector. And I think government is also very interesting. I think it depends on what kind of technology, right? Like recently, you probably know China is like this really open blockchain technology now. The government actually drive a lot implementation on the blockchain technology, particularly like in their legal system, they kind of try to implement some kind of blockchain for tracing the contract or tracing kind of this kind of thing. So I think for some new technologies, our government actually do create a lot of use cases which enable the technology company to actually provide some solution to actually, be applied. So I think it's very similar to the UK. It's kind of triangle to do it. But, the driving force, I think it's still the private sector. Yeah.
It's a bit hard for me to compare them. It's almost like to compare apple to a pear. From my perspective, there were definitely relationship in three of them in this triangle relationship, but I see it in a way it's different form and for different reasons as well, because the players are very different. And I just pick up on Linda's case. You see some of the AI company that, for example, SenseTime is incubated from a Hong Kong university. So that's one of the biggest unicorn AI right now in the whole world. But yes, the stage of development is very different. And I think that now start to, in this a bit earlier stage, I think, than what's happening here, to work together towards a lot of deep tech and healthcare, particularly. And on the fintech, you don't really see a lot happening. And I'm quite fascinated by how mature that, for example, Cambridge it's been done over the past probably 20 years on incubating new ideas, and they have quite sophisticated investors to back up the ideas come straight out of the university. And some of them already becoming a listed company like the IP group. And I think it's just a really different stage of thing. And it's not who is better, who is worse. It's more about the different stage of development.
Mm-hmm. What other sources of culture shock do you encounter when you go back to China?
I would say I don't need to use my laptop when I'm in China. I can do everything on mobile, basically. I think that's first culture shock after I moved back like 2 years ago.
Do you think that's also related to the, what do we call it, like the leapfrog effect? Is it that people have mobile phones now and not necessarily desktops or laptops?
Yes, for sure. I mean, lots of people, they didn't have a laptop and they just went straight to the mobile, right? From nothing and to mobile. But also it's like everything design is basically mobile focused now. So lots of company actually ask me, say, we want to go to China. What should I do? I say, first thing, you don't need to worry about how to translate your website to Chinese because nobody going to look at your website. People would care about, do you have a WeChat account? Do you need to create all your content under WeChat ecosystem on mobile? So you need to build a WeChat app or mobile app, but your website, you could have one, but don't worry too much. You wouldn't get too much traffic on that. Yeah.
On that point there, so in terms of like mobile behavior, is it app based? Is it mini apps within super apps? Like
there's lots of super apps like WeChat. It's the number one super app. And inside WeChat ecosystem, everyone can create, it's called like a mini app, like services. But if WeChat also have more like a blog type of content channel. So everyone can create their own content channel. So there's lots of kind of people actually doing very, very interesting content there. So in a way, it's more like you create your mobile portal and then you also can create your mobile commerce, also create mobile services, whatever you can all create inside WeChat, like an ecosystem. But there are also like other, like, if you entertainment sector, TikTok is definitely number one, for the video side. If it's an e-commerce, like a Taobao, Tianmao, which is Alibaba's company, they're really the largest. But also, I mean, there's lots kind of like super app there. And for most people actually use their time on the super app. That's make actually harder for a startup actually to do B2C unless they have to be really good and find a different niche area to do it. Yeah.
Just go back to the cultural shock. Among the 1 billion internet user, 75% only access internet through their mobile.
Meaning they don't access internet through anything else?
They wouldn't use like the laptop, for example, or the desktop for internet. They only use mobile for internet, 75%.
Yeah, just take another point on top of that. I think another reason why people use that so much also because in China, they're very good infrastructure. So really everywhere, even the desert, you can get a 4G signal. So I have to say it's very good infrastructure. And, but like every time I get out from Old Street, I'm a little bit struggling because it would take me a little bit find the spot which I can get signal to get a Google map working. I think that's also the challenge probably in here. So
for me, it's just really interesting that, to see the difference. And I think my perspective is less about, which model or which case is better than the other, like the UK or China per se. I think it's more about the refresher narrative, about the respect and understand the difference and also like be inspired. It might not work in UK. I mean, like 95%, it won't work. But I think you see the different mentality. You see a quite different ecosystem, a different user behavior, different everything. And you feel like, oh, I've never think about that business model. And that is always something that I find fascinating.
Linda, am I right in thinking that either currently or previously you worked with maybe in an advisory capacity with like the venture arm of a Chinese, big Chinese tech company?
Yeah.
And what were you doing with them?
I'm their advisor,
Okay.
Baidu Venture, which is like a financial investor, VC investor, but really just focus on AI, robotics startups, really the deep tech startups. I was helping them to actually looking for their UK, particularly UK strategy and partnerships. So working with, particularly like with a university to have some partnership, because like just you mentioned, the ecosystem in here is a little bit different to in China. So university play a very, very important role in the innovation. So, that was, I was having to do. And the Baidu Venture actually very interesting. VC, I think they are very unique if from VC perspective, they all in focus on the deep tech. And then, it's a Chinese VC, but actually have a really big team in the US, in Silicon Valley. So actually invest both US and Chinese deep tech startups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. So you have experience in multiple capacities now in the UK startup scene. So both as an advisor to a VC effectively, and now as a co-founder of a startup. You also, as we discussed before, started a company in China.
Yeah.
Compare and contrast.
Yeah.
What is similar, and maybe more interesting, what's different about starting a company in China versus starting a company here? Maybe more in terms of just like startup culture and innovation culture. And here there's like or at least in the West, there's like the traditional concept of like two college dropouts in t-shirts in their garage, like hacking a app together or something and then seeing what happens. Would you describe the cultures being similar or different in any interesting ways?
I think very similar, to be honest. I think very similar. It's all about we have some ideas. I want to build something. And early stage, we don't know which way is the right way. We have to explore our different directions. And hopefully eventually we'll find the right direction. I have to say it's very, very similar. But I think in China, the sense of competition probably is higher than the sense of competition. It's not natural, not real competition, but the feeling of the competition, I think in China, probably more than in Europe, because I think China is like, really about the speed. So it's constantly someone maybe just start something and doing faster than you. So that kind of like a sense of the urgency, it kind of always like make people a little bit more worried about things.
So don't sleep.
Don't sleep. Yeah, basically, don't sleep. You have to really move really, really fast. I think that's probably different from the culture. But in terms of how startup, I think I personally find it very, very similar, very passionate. Everybody passionate about what they do and try to do something, create something, and to really benefit the society, try to bring the value to our customer or to our users. Yeah.
If you put your kind of VC hat on, and if you were talking to companies in early stage companies in China that you're considering investing in, or early stage companies in the UK that you're considering investing in, would you be asking the same questions? Would you be looking for the same signs of either early traction or mindset or team composition?
I personally do, because I'm not typical VC, right? And the Baidu Ventures actually have very unique view on a lot of things. But my impression is, correct me, I'm wrong, right? So my impression is in here, probably people would need to think about their financial model in very early stage. But in China, very first stage, people still think maybe more care about what's the problem you're trying to solve. And then,
the market is big enough that...
Yeah, because the market is big enough. If you find the right problem, you will eventually figure out a model. But in here, I guess, different challenge you need to facing. So I think it's also a good way, because that early stage, we really help the startup to actually think about, is there really the financial value?
You guys have also both exited startups. I think one in China, Linda, your company, and yours here in the UK recently to Greensill. So, I mean, firstly, we just stop from and reflect. Linda, you sold your company to Alibaba. You sold your company to Greensill. I mean, I'm in the presence of entrepreneurial royalty here. So glad I could get that fact in. Tell me about your experiences. And would you have expected them to be different if your experience hadn't been in the UK, and Linda, if yours hadn't been in China?
It's exciting to be entrepreneur. We probably don't really know what's going to happen or what we're going to experience. I think that kind of out of expectation always drive me to do something. So I think yes and no. something as we expected, become a big part of like a great company. Alibaba is a really, really great company. I learned a lot from Alibaba's company. And also maybe no, in a way is, we have to change our mindset to think about things. Maybe has to think about something from much bigger vision or broader view instead of maybe just focus on what we're actually doing. Very that focused view about being a startup, right? Being startup has to be very focused to do the things way our objective right now. So I think it's been very exciting journey to went through the whole things. And I have to say we've been really lucky. Alibaba is great company, and they're doing so many exciting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are two ways to look at it, right? So you can look at it through a process perspective. The acquisition didn't exactly we didn't really expect acquisition in such early stage. And that time, the core team was developing the pilot and the product. You felt like you are on the sprint every day. And with this acquisition, super exciting thing come in, you are like sprint multiple 5. The speed and also about, there's naturally a bit of pressure, anxiety around when the deal get closer and closer. When it really happens, it's very, very exciting. At the same time, it creates a lot of sense of responsibility as well. And the second way to look at it is around the synergy, right? I think when you come into a good M&A of execution, it's always you need to look at the buyer and sellers, their synergy between each other. I guess we are very, very lucky because the way Greensill unlocks the capital for suppliers are very, very similar with the way we unlock for the employee. The mechanism behind are very similar, and we are very lucky to have Greensill to have built an infrastructure, including their very strong origination team and very strong distribution team to supercharge our business proposition. So far, the journey has been amazing. And we have a long journey ahead, so I can't say for the future. But it's been great. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm absolutely fascinated by this subject. I could easily go on asking you guys questions late into the night here, but for everyone's benefit, the listeners included, I should probably wrap it up. Linda and Yi, thank you so much for joining tonight. This has been a great pleasure.
Thank you so much, Will. It's been a great pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning into Rebank. If you like today's show, reach out. Follow us on Twitter at Rebank Podcast and join the conversation. For more on banking, fintech, and the future, check out our regular content at www.bankingthefuture.com.